Hi, today I thought I'd talk about the known credential problem. I was reviewing the CISA risk and vulnerability assessment for critical infrastructure, and it was really interesting that almost 42% of successful attacks on critical infrastructure were able to leverage known credentials. And known credentials, people tend to think in terms of my username, my password, but they can also be service accounts, API keys, system accounts. And what we see a lot in critical infrastructure is that the devices, they're not really connected to a proper identity system that would support single sign-on and authentication. Instead, they have quote-unquote local accounts, local passwords. And one of the real challenges with the local account is they never get rotated or changed, and they're shared. Usually there's a sticker on it, in fact, that tells you what the account is. And there's also a pattern to them. And what happens with that pattern is somebody becomes aware of one or guesses, and then they can, from that one pattern, they can replicate it across a bunch of other machines. And this is used both for the initial inbound attack. They manage to get access to this device through some network vulnerability or Wi-Fi or spear phishing, but sometimes it's also used for lateral traversal. The user might, might have some weakness on their machine and bring it into the network, and then it goes sideways and finds one of those. And what I was thinking about as I looked at this is, 41%, it seems high. It means that it must be the easiest approach, because the attackers, they're not particularly smart, and they are particularly lazy. And then I started to think about what tools magnify the not so smart and the more than averagely lazy person, and the answer is AI. And I'm not putting AI down, but let's be honest, that's what that tool is really good at, is for somebody to, without a lot of effort or understanding, to be able to magnify their effective output. And whether it's cheating on an exam or it's writing some copy for a website. But when you're talking about a malicious attacker, and there's a bunch of work to be done, I got to figure out some possible patterns, and maybe it's the company's name and the year, SCADA, site name 01 or something like that. You can put that AI system to work and have it just go and try all the patterns. And what would be my alternative? I could do it by hand, type, like they do in the movies. Or I could write some software and have that software do it. But writing software, it sounds a lot like work. So I could either tell the AI, hey, Magic AI, write me a Python script to do X. Or I could just say, hey, Magic AI, through the power of MCP and A2A and agents, just go try to log into that machine. And here's something I know about the site, and here's some common patterns that other sites have used in the past. And what's the best protection against this? Well, the problem is usually these critical infrastructure sites, they're on a local identity for a reason. And the reason is that they're somewhat air-gapped, and the corporate infrastructure doesn't reach in there. And they could get rid of that and just make it connect to their Active Directory. But then they add another set of risks. Now ransomware can spread via the Active Directory downwards or via that machine upwards. And it's a little bit hard for them to use cloud-based, OAuth 2 and so on, because typically they don't have internet access for it. And as a consequence, they're just encouraged to go down this path of, machine A has password B and we'll never change it and just don't tell. And, machine C also has password B because it's nearby. And machine D, it's got a very similar password, but we just added a -2. And machine E, well, it's the site password, but it's 2025, so we added that number in there. And yeah, that makes it a little bit harder for the lazy, unintelligent hacker to guess it. But now that they've got the power of AI, they go sideways. And I think, that report that I was reading, that was the summation of all of the attacks across critical infrastructure in 2023, summarized at the end of 2024. We're halfway through 2025 now. I bet you the one for 2025 is much worse, both in terms of the number of attacks, but also in terms of the success rate that they have. They're able to do more guesses per second and better guesses, but they're also able to look at more spots for, sometimes on the disk, the credentials are stored there, they're in the home directory or profile or registry or what have you, and then go laterally through it. So obviously, in my opinion, the best solution to this is a zero trust environment where you disambiguate so that each user and each resource has its own trust pair, and you make it so that there is a proper single sign-on per person, not per company, not shared accounts, and that it supports proper multi-factor, and do it in a way that's respectful of the air gap that's there. And in my slightly biased opinion, Agilicus NEX is the best architecture for that, which is exactly the problem we solve for our critical infrastructure customers. You want to know more? Just send me an email, info@agilicus.com. My name is Don Bowman, and thanks very much. Bye-bye.